And today, they're going to crash. It's going to take people down. And now it's here. Office buildings will soon be homeless shelters. Oh, I took your advice. I bought a house. I'm going to make some money. I said, at the top of the frickin' market? Don't listen to your stupid real estate agent who tells you that, oh, the price of real estate always goes up, because it doesn't. When I hear people coming up to me and say, oh, the price of real estate going up and they're jumping in to buy real estate right now, I don't say anything. And the reason is that people are just getting into the hype. All this credit, it's actually debt, credit and debt, pumping into this economy, trying to prevent this crash. And if inflation keeps going, I get richer. I am extremely happy. And I think Biden, I'm not Republican or Democrat, he intentionally wants inflation. That's why he shut down the XL pipeline. That's why he stopped drilling to get oil prices up. When oil prices go up, you know, all these truckers in Ottawa screaming they can't get food to the table and all this, prices of food go up. Inflation keeps going up regardless of what's going on, just because the policies shutting down the XL pipeline, stopping drilling of oil, so the price of oil goes up. I watch all this, and meanwhile these people are jumping out and buying real estate like there's no tomorrow, and I can't even talk to them. We're on a turning point. But please understand, ladies and gentlemen, inflation makes the rich extremely rich. The middle class will pay higher taxes, and the poor will get poor because they're the ones who can't afford that $25 Wagyu steak that my friends are selling. So that's why we're on the biggest critical turning points, and that's why I don't know how many years ago when I walked past Richard's book in Borders, and it says the dollar crisis. If you understand what's going on, the problem is the U.S. dollar. Because in 1944, it stopped being money. It just became the reserve currency of the world. And in 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. We're being set up right now, one of the biggest changes in world history. And so, oh, I bought a property. What do you think? I can't even talk to him. Because this, to me, is 2007 all over again, and then the repo market collapsed. 2008, the market collapsed, and back in 2008, this guy named Bernanke, I believe it was, could print money. And this is where we are today. You've got to wake up, ladies and gentlemen, because otherwise you're just this stupid little hog just driving to slaughter. So America is we're at, not just America, we're one of the biggest turning points in world history. And like there was Rockefeller, one of those guys said is, when shoe shine boys are giving you stock tips, time to get out. And I was in Safeway the other night, and these people are coming up to me, I did what you said, I bought a rental property. And I came back home and I said to Kim, time to sell. It is so dangerous, but you can't talk somebody out of it because they drank the Kool-Aid. So that's why I'm really honored to have a dear friend, Richard Duncan, been friends for years. He helped Kim and I time the last turn back in 2008. We made fortunes because while everybody was selling, we were buying. And that time has come again. And so that's why please listen to what Richard Duncan has to say.
A few months ago, the Fed was still creating $120 billion every month. And then in November, they said they were going to start tapering that, reducing that by $15 billion a month. But the very next month in December, they said they're going to double that and reduce it by $30 billion a month. And that meant that it's going to come to a complete stop. The money printing is going to end totally early next month.
No more printing next month.
No more printing. And then the real blow came. They started letting it be known that they were planning to do the opposite. Instead of printing a lot of money through quantitative easing, they're going to start destroying a lot of money through quantitative tightening. Now, when they print money, that pushes asset prices up. When they destroy money, that tends to make asset prices fall. And when the stock market...
How do they destroy money?
Well, they destroy money because when they print money, they buy bonds with that money. And normally, when the bonds mature, they just roll them over and buy a similar kind of bond. But they destroy money by essentially selling those bonds. And when the Fed, what happens is the bonds mature and the Fed doesn't roll them over. Someone else has to buy the bond. So the Fed gets its money back. And when the Fed gets money back, that money just evaporates. The Fed doesn't need to keep any money because it can make all the money it wants anytime it wants to. So it's a bit complicated to explain in just a few sentences, but the bottom line is it's the opposite of quantitative easing. quantitative tightening destroys money, and that tends to make stock prices fall. And we're about to get a heavy dose of quantitative tightening coming into effect within the next couple of months.
And it's going to make it harder and harder for mom and pop to go buy that house they're going to flip.
And isn't that going to drive inflation through the roof?
Well, they think the opposite. When they, instead of printing money, that's the thing that normally causes inflation. It stimulates the economy, it creates growth. But when they destroy the money, that tends to make asset prices fall, like stocks and property. So people are less rich, so they spend less money. And if they spend less money, then prices tend to fall. So that's why they're doing this. They're worried now that the inflation rate has moved up to 7%, and they're taking steps to bring it back down. But what they may find is this could cause a significant stock market crash. And some of the high-flying stocks got hit a whole lot harder than that.
Look at Meta or Facebook, whatever those I call now, they tanked.
Destroying $230 billion of American wealth.
There goes your 401k, sweethearts. And that's why I spoke out against 401ks forever. You know, and then all you guys who are you're planning on renting your property, people won't be able to afford the rents. That's what it means.
Well, so total credit is equal to total debt, because one person's loan is another person's debt, right? So the two have to equal each other. So one way of thinking about this, the easiest way to think about it, is all the debt in the country. Government debt, household sector debt, corporate debt, financial sector debt, all the debt. It first went through $1 trillion in 1964 when I was 4 years old. Now it's $90 trillion, from 1 trillion to 90 trillion during my lifetime. And this credit explosion, which would not have been possible if we had remained on a gold system where dollars were backed by gold. But this explosion of credit has transformed the world.
Wait, Richard, hang on. You're speaking like an economist again. Credit is what the Fed and the Treasury allow people to get to the big banks like Wells Fargo and all that. And that credit then allows people, the banks, to send out debt. So then corporations and individuals come in and they take credit and they turn it into debt, but it's the same thing. So by creating credit, debt could explode. Am I correct on that or incorrect?
No, I think you put that exactly right.
Yeah, credit's not a word people use. They use credit card, but they think about debt, their household debt. So that's what I'm saying. We don't teach economists. We teach everyday mom and pop who is trying to speculate on their 401k or their house.
The reason I tend to use credit is because I say this system that we have now is not capitalism, it's creditism.
Yes.
Creditism sounds better than debtism. I tried that. Creditism works better.
Yeah,
Capitalism to creditism. Because credit growth drives economic growth now. We're dependent on it.
Yeah, what Richard is saying is the way America grew was because we produced products. Now we don't produce products, they create credit or debt. Am I correct on that one?
That's right. Instead of our economy being driven by investment and savings as it used to be, is now driven by credit creation and consumption, and more credit creation and consumption. And that's been great. The problem is it requires credit growth to survive. If credit contracts, we have a depression. And that has made us dependent now on government borrowing and government spending to keep us out of depression.
So if you're going to buy, I don't know how many people, I took your advice. I bought a house. I'm going to make some money. I said, at the top of the frickin' market? And what about all these guys in this 401ks? 401ks came into existence in 1974. It was called ERISA. And I've been speaking out against 401ks because I will get censored with this one. But 401ks are like a condom. It gives you a false sense of security while you're being screwed. Do you know what I mean? And if this market crashes, when they raise these interest rates, if they do, your 401k turns to 201k. Just as you get ready to retire, all you old guys like me, hear what I'm saying? If they raise interest rates because they're going to stop inflation, your 401k may be toast. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Or if you're a millennial and you got mom and dad who are living in La La Land with their 2 401ks, you might be in serious trouble. A very important subject. And the subject is real estate, basically. It's important simply because it's real estate. Parts of it are in serious trouble right now. But when things are bad, also there's good opportunities for things. How many places in the world have we gone to?
It's been all over the place.
Yeah, we travel the world. We're talking about real estate because, number one, real estate uses debt. And you may or may not know this, but the U.S. dollar is debt. In other words, money cannot exist unless somebody borrows it. And so all these guys, our friend Dave Ramsey always says, live debt free. I go, you got to be crazy. But I'm going to back Dave up. If you don't know how to handle debt, definitely live debt free. Right, Kenny?
Yes, that's right. I agree. If you don't know what money is and how to use it,
right,
then he's right on.
I met Dave at a restaurant up the street here, and he's a great guy. And his advice for most people is cut up your credit cards, get out of debt and all this. But Kenny, what's happening in the real estate market today as interest rates go up and all this stuff? I just heard Richard Fisher, the Dallas Fed chairman, he said a unit, I could be wrong on the numbers, 3,500 units. One apartment complex went down. Well, that's a lot of property.
And Blackstone defaulted on debt in New York on a set of buildings. I call it, we're in the first inning.
And I'm afraid it's going to get worse.
You don't have to be afraid about that. It's happening already. It's definitely happening. The issue this year and next year is going to be what we call maturing debt. Debt that's maturing.
Another thing to understand is different types of real estate. Some of the worst properties are the darlings called office buildings. Everybody thought, I'm going to own an office building in Manhattan and all this. And today, they're going to crash. It's going to take people down.
I just read an article today, Robert, that the cities and counties are actually throwing money at developers to convert office buildings into apartments. They already know that those buildings, those office buildings, are going to be eyesores at some point.
I was a student of Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller. We call him the friendly genius. John Denver called him the grandfather of the future because the futurist. And years ago in the 80s, I heard him say office buildings will someday be homes for homeless people. I went, what? That was sacrilegious for me back then. And now it's here.
That's quite a prediction, too. That was how long ago was that? 50 years?
50 years ago. I'm listening to this guy. He says office buildings will soon be homeless shelters. And you look at the number of homeless is exploding. I don't want to be an owner of a homeless shelter, as you know. It's either going to be the worst of times for real estate or the best of times, right? The reason living debt-free makes no sense, simply because the fiat currency called the US dollar, the yen, the peso, the euro, they're debt. They're instruments of debt. Like a bond is an instrument of debt. And that's why Dave Ramsey saying living debt-free, it kind of goes contraindicative. How can that be if it's debt? But the good thing about debt is it's debt. And on top of that, the more debt you use, the less tax you pay.
It's not obvious to a lot of people. Just do what the Fed's doing.
Yeah, it's the strangest markets. We're in serious, world economy is in serious trouble, but it's also a great opportunity time. We use debt all the time, 100% debt. And I tell you, it is a game of debt.
We're borrowing at less than inflation. So that's when we talk about money, that's how you do it.
And a good thing, too, is the amateurs are now floating to the surface, as they say. I feel terrible for people because people come up to me and they go, oh, I took your advice. I bought real estate. I'm going, holy moly. Real estate's not like a stock. You don't just buy real estate like you buy Apple. The difference is if you buy Apple stock, and let's say it's $10 and it goes down to $6, you can get out of it really quickly. But with real estate, it's not that liquid, and that's why you've got to be smarter. And why I cringe when people say, oh, I just jumped into real estate. I'm going, oh my God, that's like jumping off a moving train or something. So much is going on in real estate.
What happens is guys like you, or I would say anybody over 50
has seen it.
They've seen the cycles. They've felt the pain if they made it. But a lot of people are pretty delusional about, and it has been for years, next year's going to be better than last year. It's just not the case.
No. What happened since 2008, they kept lowering interest rates, and the whole world economy went into a bubble.
Correct.
It was a real estate bubble, a bond bubble, and a stock bubble. And so everything got inflated, but as they started to lower interest rates in 2020, or raise interest rates in 2020, a lot of those bubbles are bursting. So it's good news and bad news. And all of us are old guys. The people I caution that you have a financial planner that's at 35, let's say. That financial planner has only known a boom market. Because as it dropped interest rates, the market kept going up. So I meet some of the young women and men, they go, oh, yeah. All they know is a good market. But the biggest opportunity is float when the bodies start floating. When the bodies start floating to the surface, you go, oh my God, I can't believe that came up. Oh my God, look at that. There were so many deals coming up when the fish start to float. And that goes to the saying, your profit is made when you buy, not when you sell.
So the cash flow versus capital gain strategy that you laid out in Bridgehead Port Ed, this is the time where you're going to start to realize that philosophy. That's been our philosophy all along. Everything I have cash flows. And that's just not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people bought big assets on a capital gain strategy. And guess what? That gain is not there.
So capital gain strategies, we call it flipping. When I first met Kenny 20-something years ago, everybody was into flipping. The show Flip This House and all this. So you buy a property for, let's say, $10,000. It goes up to $15,000. You flip it, you net $5,000, but you pay capital gains. And we don't do that. I'm chuckling because the world's full of real estate gurus. If you're a housewife or a husband and you bought 2 real estate properties, you know Donald Trump as far as you're concerned.
Right.
But there's some of these charlatans on YouTube. I've got into arguments with some of them. This guy says the way you get rich, just go out and buy a 200-unit apartment house. And I said, you don't start with a 200-unit apartment house. That's suicide. But that's what he was selling. And I know the trick is called a bait and switch. So you go there, he shows you how you too can buy a 200-unit apartment house for like nothing down and all this other stuff, but you're on the hook for millions. And then you go roaring off and try to do it. His real gimmick is to sell you what he is selling.
Oh, you can't do it? I can do it for you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's frightening times, but it's also exciting times. Always remember your profit is made when you buy. And then one of the things I really get kind of sad about people, when real estate started going up, everybody started jumping in. And that's not when you jump in, not when it's going up. You want to ride that roller coaster down and then buy.
When there's a line out the door of people trying to buy the asset, that means it's over.
As many of you know, the economy is on shaky grounds. Banks are failing all over the place. And the question is, what do you do about it? And I get really, really excited because your profits are made when you buy. And as prices of real estate crash, it's actually the best time to be a buyer. But as I say it again, I meet people who are amateurs at this business. They wait, the price on that 100,000 went up 200,000. Oh, we got buyers lined up for the property. And that's when people jump in. You should be getting out. The other thing too is that people say, well, I don't have money and all this. When the real estate market crashed, it's crashed several times.
Yep.
And I had no money. And I said, we were trying to put a deal together. Interest rates were 12%. And today's what percent are they today?
Yeah, it's more like 5 to 6.
And people come, I would have killed back then for a 5 to 6% interest rate. It's always a good time, but you have to know what you're doing with real estate. My rich dad always said, only lazy people use their own money.
I know. Gosh, that was such a great statement. It's true.
Yeah.
People don't realize, like when you put your money with an insurance or a pension or even in a bank, it's a liability for those institutions, period. They owe you expense, in the form of interest. That's a problem for them. So they have to lend it to guys like us. And that's called OPM or other people's money.
And always remember this, the US dollar or the euro and all these other currencies, they come into existence only by people borrowing it.
Yes.
And that's why our friend Dave Ramsey says live debt free. And that's good advice if you don't know what you're doing. Because I still remember putting deals together, interest rates were 12%. You have to get smarter. That's all it means.
It's the bubble went up, now it's coming down.
Right. The people that are in trouble, the people who jumped in late, they were at the top of the market. It's going to keep going up. That's a big lie, is that real estate always goes up. That's not true at all.
No, my gosh, it's delusion. It's that herd mentality, right? Everybody's jumping on. I'm going to miss out and next year's going to be better than last year. That's not how real estate works.
No. We also practice what we preach. We study also. We were just in Dallas, outside of Dallas, and we called the place called the Ranch. And the instructor said that the reason people are poor is because they're farthest from the truth.
Yeah, that really hit me. The truth is what the truth is, period. And then you got people's realities, which is typically further from the truth. Not always, but the further from the truth you get, the poorer they are.
Yeah, so ever since the last couple of weeks, I see a poor person. I said, wonder what truth they're away from. There's something they're not seeing. When I wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad 25 years ago, I said, your house is not an asset. I nearly got crucified on the cross for that one.
Yeah, now everybody says it. Way ahead the game.
Do you know what I mean? There's nothing worse than hanging out with a toad. No, do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I told you real estate was bad, it crashed. Oh, I told you, I don't want to buy real estate because you have to clean toilets and all this stuff. I hear all of that stuff. But that's what we learned last week in Dallas. The poorer you are is because you're furthest from
the truth.
And when they tell you get out of debt, that's really not the truth.
Well, it was interesting because remember we were down there with Dr. Nicole and she said, it's the same with health. The further you are from the truth around health, the worse condition you're in. So the truth, it's a very interesting thing, and the reality or your perspective or even your opinion can be very far away from the truth.
Right. And some of the truths, the reason people are poor is, well, I don't have any money. I can't afford it. That is not true. That's your opinion of your measly little self.
Yeah.
You have the power to do what you want to do.
I definitely don't think that we're going to be able to fix inflation for a while.
No.
So that's number one. You got to be really careful. We never really had to think about that too much, right? Inflation's been low and it slowly eroded our purchasing power, but now it's different. The gloves are off. So you can't just put your head in the sand. Because if we're going to be at 5-6% inflation, I mean, you're talking about 15, 20, 30% reduction of your purchasing power in just a few years. So you have to figure out, how can I hedge myself against inflation? And that could be lots of things. You know, what's going to grow with inflation? It doesn't necessarily have to be real estate. It can be anything. Debt is certainly one of those things.
I thought there was going to be a big problem in real estate, but Kim and I had a property and we went up for sale for $9.75 million. The realtor says it'll never sell. It's sold immediately. And the reason is what happens with inflation, your cash becomes trash. But also the reason the realtor finally said, we misjudged this market. You know, $10 million, it's a residential property. It's a pretty nice one in Hawaii. And the reason the person bought it is they'd rather have their cash sitting in a piece of real estate than in the bank.
You got it.
Yep.
And what does that tell you?
Yeah, the farther from the truth you are, the poorer you are. And the biggest lie ever told is it takes money to make money. That is not true. You know, don't worry about being the skipper of the Titanic. I've been the skipper a number of times, but it's always a good swimming experience. That's how you get smarter.
Right.
And I won't say this much, I've never lost money in real estate. I got in trouble. But when you scramble and you do what you have to do, you get smarter and smarter and smarter. And you go, man, I'm really glad I got into this trouble because I got smarter. The reason I say that, the average person is drinking the Kool-Aid. They just go to school, get a job, save money, get out of debt, and invest in a 401k or an IRA. You don't learn anything that way. You don't learn anything. So by jumping in as an idiot investor, you get smarter pretty quickly, right, Kenny?
I love Buffett's quote. You know, he's like, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And the tide is going out right now, my friends.
And there's going to be a lot of opportunity.
Yep.
You can't leverage gold the same way you can leverage real estate, can you?
You're brilliant, man. I use real estate as leverage to buy this. So what I do is I'll borrow, let's say, $20 million. The cash flow buys this.
You're using government printed money for your own assets.
Buy this.
And then the income from the assets you convert into gold.
Yes, this is God's money. This here is to be flushed down the toilet. And that's what they're doing with it. But, I made this much this month. Lose it.
The date of today is an important date. And the reason that's important is just yesterday at Davos, Switzerland, and the IMF stood up and said, the world economy is hitting into the worst economic headwinds since World War II. The worst. And that's why it could be bad news, but depending on how you look at it, it could be very good news.
This is about as macro an environment as I've ever seen, and I think most people's read on it is probably wrong right now. I'm going to take you through a history lesson, and then we'll get to today.
That's
and
macro.
I'll tell you why I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So why World War II? World War II was a fascinating period because, like COVID, the entire world had basically been stuck at home or been on battlefields. Everyone came back. There was no supply of commodities and goods. Global supply chains were broken, and everybody came back and started consuming again. And guess what? Inflation went up to 13% or something, maybe even higher. And that period was fascinating because interest rates went up. And the first thing that happened was the economy went straight back into recession and inflation went negative. Because it was a massive tightening of monetary conditions. You raised the cost of goods on people and didn't raise their salaries enough. People couldn't get the goods that they wanted, exactly like now, and everything collapsed. So we went back into recession, and then eventually some better times. And I'll come back into the 1940s and 50s because I think it's a really important parallel that most people misunderstand. The next time we saw anything remotely like this was 1974. A lot of people tell you it's the 70s again, inflation. Well, the inflation episode we had in the late 70s was driven by demographics. That was the baby boomers entering the workforce all at the same time. It was the largest demand shock the world had ever seen. And we had a supply shock of this oil crisis of the Arab oil embargo. That's not repeating now. What is actually more similar is 1974. 1974 was the Arab oil embargo. The price of oil tripled and interest rates went up, inflation shot up, And the immediate effect was the economy went down the toilet. Almost do not pass go. The stock market fell 50%, and the ISM survey, which is a good guide to the business cycle, anytime it crosses below 50, suggests the economy is getting weak. A recession comes at about 47. It hit 30, which was the lowest in all history. And it happened in a space of 4 months, based on exactly the same kind of setup we've got now.
You're saying that the 70s are now pretty close?
Yes, and inflation fell in 1974 afterwards. People are still thinking inflation goes on forever. It did not, and it did not in the 1940s either. Then the next one up is 1984. We saw an issue where global trade, there was a huge amount of trade disputes. The dollar was pretty strong, like it is now. Interest rates were going up, and inflation was high. And everybody was fearing, looking back and saying, oh, we don't want the early 80s, late 70s again, the inflation. So Volcker was tightening rates too much, and the economy collapsed. It didn't go to recession because the Fed quickly started cutting rates, but the dollar went up a lot more and created a lot more problems. We ended up with the Plaza Accord in 1985, when everybody had to stop the dollar going up from destroying the global economy. So then the next time we see something similar was 2008. If you remember, the oil price was at $147. Inflation was 6%. The Fed had been cutting into that because the economy was imploding. 2018, exactly the same. Oil prices high, inflation high, the Fed were hiking rates, trying to tighten the balance sheet. And what happened is the economy rolled over really quickly again. Okay, so what's going on here? Why does this phenomena keep happening? Everyone extrapolates inflation out forever. What actually happens is that consumption falls because we've tightened monetary conditions. So tightening monetary conditions to ordinary people means the cost of your mortgage has gone up at the fastest pace in history. Over a 1-year period, mortgage rates have never risen this fast. So any money you borrowed has suddenly got much more expensive. Your wages haven't kept up with the cost of just basic services like food. So you're actually feeling poorer. So you can't consume as much, and you start not consuming other things. People overextended on housing because they rushed into housing and rates have gone up for them. Also, just the rise in things like the cost of oil has meant that, gas prices, all of this stuff. And then the rise in the dollar, which is a monetary tightening. All of these things get together would suggest that the ISM is going back to 30, which is as it was in 1974, which is a terrifying fall. And it's suggesting that if we're not careful, we could have a very sharp, nasty recession, meaning kind of a negative 5% GDP recession. It might be short, depending what the Fed does, and we'll come on to that in a bit. So we've got the setup that we've seen many times in the past. We've got the forward-looking indicators, this monetary tightening, suggesting we've got some real pain to come. Then the anecdotal evidence, we're seeing all the tech companies who were bulletproof laying off staff and giving earnings warnings because everybody can't raise prices enough, so their margins are falling and people have overextended. Amazon said, we've hired too many people. They're one of the biggest employers in the United States. Okay, this is not good. But the answer to higher prices is higher prices. And that's what's happened. And everybody's looking around themselves saying, well, what's going to break? When stuff like this happens, the market goes down, something's going to break. We're looking, what bank is it? What hedge fund is it? The actual answer is, it's the economy. The economy has just broken. And the Fed are going to have to pivot. The monetary conditions that we've imposed on corporates and people is the biggest tightening in all history. We've also got China slowing down very fast because the lockdowns, but also they've been in recession, and Europe with a war and having to deal with this energy transition. So we've got no leg of global growth here. Now, the question is, how bad does this get? Let's talk some scenarios.
When people use the word recession, that means 2 back-to-back quarters of negative growth.
That's the technical definition of a recession. Yeah. To you and me, I think it means a loss of jobs and a loss in your net worth because it's the falling of asset prices that comes with a recession.
What's the possibility of sliding to a depression?
So depression, I would suggest, is a much longer, more extended period. I don't think that can happen right now. Now, I don't say that with certainty. I never do. I talk in probabilities. The reason being is there's one piece of magic, the Fed balance sheet. The Fed balance sheet disguises all bad things because what it does is when they print money, it lowers the purchasing power of the dollar. And most of the central banks at the same time do it. And people always think it's going to be inflation is what it leads to. It leads to something much more pernicious and evil, which is the debasement of currency. And what that does, how it manifests itself, is all of these scarce assets, equities, real estate, gold, crypto, go up a lot. But all they're doing is reflecting the devaluation of the fiat currency itself. So that optically can change everything, because suddenly all of these things go up, everybody feels okay, and it changes the outcome. People are still worse off, generally, but it's a trick. And so I think that trick gets played again pretty soon. This time I think the trick gets played in a different way, which was the other genie that came out of the bottle in 2020, which the Europeans are doing now, some states in the US are doing, Japan is doing, India is doing, which is direct transfer payments to individuals.
When I heard you talking about that, Raul, I thought you went to the dark side, man. MMT, UBI, and all that stuff, which is to me Marxist. But you're also looking at it from the humanitarian side.
Regardless of what our political or economic views are, this is what is going to happen. So we have to judge it with that lens, not how we would like it to be, but what it will be and what the probabilities are.
I look at the emptying office spaces because people are not going back to work. I mean, this is not an ordinary recession. You know, Apple says they're not going to go back to work. You look, all the office buildings empty, and, you know, residential real estate depends upon jobs. You know what I mean? If you're saying recession means a loss of jobs, which Amazon's laying off, what happens to real estate wherever they have an Amazon office? This is the ripple effect, which is why I'm saying that was one of the biggest announcements I ever heard, that the IMF is saying the world faces one of the biggest economic challenges since World War II. But one thing that he mentioned is talked about debasement of currency. So here's a penny, it's copper. And in 1964, I was looking at the quarters and dimes, same color. Do you know what I mean? It's the same color. So basically, in 1964, dimes, quarters, and half dollars became copper. And that's what you were talking about, debasement. And I think we're paying the price for it, because I'm really glad you started with history, because macroeconomics is history. You have to look back in time. And every time people did this, first was the Chinese, they printed paper money, and the Chinese empire collapsed. And then when the Romans did the same thing, debased the currency, the Roman Empire collapsed. We're looking at the end of the American Empire.
I think it's going to happen at a shocking speed. So 1974, we went from everything looks okay to the worst recession since World War II in 4 months. I'm thinking it's going to look similar because of the speed of the monetary tightening, the speed of the rise of prices. So I think we are going to have a very ugly few months, both economically and for markets. The question is, what comes next? And that's the key point. If my base case comes into play, which is the Fed pivot, and after that they will say, well, we're just going to see, and we'll see the economy start going down the toilet. And they will start thinking, well, we're not going to do QT now either. So they're not going to start shrinking the Fed balance sheet. And before you know it, we're going to be talking about rate cuts, but we don't have many rates to cut, rates are nowhere. So the only outcome is they're going to have to print money. The credit markets are already starting to dry up. That's usually an indicator. The housing market's rolling over.
Printing money is this stuff here. You have
That's
a
right.
silver coin. You have a copper coin made silver, right?
That's right.
Basically, it's called debasing the currency, which the Romans and Chinese already did.
Yeah, because don't forget, debasement of currency works in a simple way. If you're really thirsty and I have a bottle of water, you'll pay anything for it. If you're really thirsty and I've got 5 bottles of water, you're kind of thinking, yeah, I probably need some of that water, I'll buy them all, but at a lower price. If I say, here's 1 million bottles of water, you don't want any of it because there's too much water now. It has no scarcity. So if you make too much of something, it becomes less valuable. So if Da Vinci had created 50 million pieces of art, guess what? They're worthless. And so it's that concept. And what it does is if something gets devalued versus something else, so we're not making more shares in the S&P, actually what we're doing is buying them back, making less of them. Therefore, the S&P goes up. Real estate. Yes, there's periods where we try and create new real estate, but generally real estate prices go up versus the Fed balance sheet because it's a relatively scarce asset. Same with gold, same with crypto. So that's the phenomena. Depends how fast they deploy the balance sheet, because this balance sheet magic optically changes markets. And if markets go up, then household net worth stabilizes and spending comes back. Companies stop laying people off. So it's actually a bit of a magic trick.
It comes down, that old saying, the bull goes up the stairs, the bear goes out the window. The bear is about to go out the window. The question is, when does a bull start climbing again, right?
And we either go through a scenario like 2000, which was a typical old school recession where equity markets unwound excesses, the bear market was 18 months or so, and then the Fed keep cutting rates and eventually it stabilizes. But if we look at 2008, which was the next recession, as soon as the Fed used the Fed balance sheet, we pretty much stopped in its tracks. Really quite quick after they did that. They cut rates first, didn't really help because the banks had seized up. Then they used the balance sheet. Then they did it again in 2010, 12, 16, and then 18 was the Fed pivot, the Powell pivot, where they went from hiking to, oh my God, we need to cut.
Trump yelled at the guy. He says, you cut this out. You're killing my economy.
That's right. So inflation had gone up. But Powell like, well, I need to do this. But the economy cannot take higher rates because everybody's so in debt and everybody's so old. That is the problem.
So here we are. We have employers not going back to work. So all these REITs, REITs, real estate investment trusts, they own all these office buildings. And then never has the Fed, I think there's a $30 trillion debt now with $200 trillion off balance sheet. And they keep cutting rates and all this. But the question is, can they keep doing the same thing given the conditions of today?
This is going to take us back to the 1940s in a sec. But you're going to get destroyed because of the supply chain issues and your wages won't keep up. So we're going to destroy household net worth and everything's levered. So all the borrowings against houses and all the borrowings against equities and all of the borrowings on top of borrowings. And you're going to let the collateral go down and blow the entire thing up.
But isn't that what they're doing when they say they're going to pay off the student loan debt?
That's debt forgiveness, that's MMT, right? Which is coming, whether we like it or not. What they're trying to do is reduce the debt via financial repression, which is you basically have inflation running slightly higher, so you have then interest rates. So what you want is to reduce the real value of the debt. So if you think back to your parents, how much they paid for a house and the mortgage they had, the mortgage seems laughable. It's because over time, inflation raised the value of the house and the debt doesn't get raised. So in the end, the debt is nothing.
So the way that is this stuff here make the money less valuable.
Correct. It makes the debt less valuable.
Right.
So it's okay if you're in debt, but if you're lending money, it becomes complicated. But the point being is you either have a fiscal stimulus, which is, let's say, the Republican view. We'll have a fiscal stimulus, cut taxes, and we'll put some spending. And what happens is that doesn't go to the people who are the worst off. It's creating this issue of 1% versus 99, which everybody can see and nobody knows how to solve. The issue is actually the balance sheet because all of the expensive assets keep going up because they keep printing money.
The rich get richer.
But doing this blanket fiscal stimulus is hard because the rich get richer again. So I think people have thought, well, maybe we should just try and give it directly to the people who are most affected. Okay, those are the two choices, or you do nothing, which is too late because there's too much debt. So you can't let the system clear anymore. The old way would have been you let the system clear, it's all okay, you just have a recession, everyone stops borrowing as much money, blah, 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 blah. The world is 400% of GDP in debt. The world has never been this in debt in all economic history. Let's go back to the 1940s now and figure out how bad it was then. This was the very similar setup, the worst supply chain issues, massive inflation, everybody coming back in. But what happened was the economy collapsed. Then interest rates came down and they stabilized. And they stabilized because the Fed stabilized them. And inflation was running slightly hot, 3%, and bond yields are about 2%. So real rates, meaning you in the property market, are going to make a lot of money. So negative real rates become very good for assets. And what happened in the 1940s and 50s was a massive economic boom. What we actually got was the value of the war debt eroding because of this financial repression. We had the value of assets like housing. The equity market went up 900% over that period of time. There was a lot of fiscal stimulus because you had to rebuild after the war and companies were building factories. So if you think of now, companies are going to be rebuilding factories in the United States or in Europe and not in China. So that's going to add some stimulus. Yes, the jobs are not there. It's robots in the factories, but it's still stimulus for the economy. The government will do some stimulus as we've talked about. Interest rates will remain relatively low. Inflation will remain controllable, but a little bit higher than it has been. And what that sets off is a period of stability and boom because there's so much technology. There's a lot of big things happening in the world that could be. So that would be my rosy outcome would be that. And I think that is still my highest probability, that we kind of muddle through this in a way that we don't expect. because it feels like the end of the world. Imagine what it must have felt like in 1948. All you can see is the end of the world. And then you get this massive inflation. You just think this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. What actually came out of it was something very different. It was the rise of technology. It was the rise of the US as a big superpower. It was a rise of the rebuilding of Europe, the rise of Japan. It was an incredible period.
The Bretton Woods Agreement, where the dollar became the reserve currency of the world, and all these really good things happened for America.
It's the same moment. All of those things got built then. Every one of them. From the Geneva Convention to the IMF to the World Bank to the United Nations, they all came in that period, 47.
Right,
Yeah.
same time. Is this what they're kind of alluding to with the Great Reset? It's all going to change again?
Yeah, it's the fourth turning, and that's where we are. And this may be the final event of the fourth turning. It may be just another phase of pushing this towards it. 2008, 2020, and maybe now. It just keeps moving the world to the direction that we all know it has to go. Is we need to stop what we're doing and change what we're doing. I always say the bond market is the truth. The bond market, the job of bond market participants is two things only. What is the future rate of inflation and what's economic growth? Now in the stock market, it's like earnings and this and emotion and all of that. The bond market is simply two things. So they usually get it right. And this is a structural shift in the global economy. If we're right here, and you've got cash, and we're going to see this big whoosh, and it probably means that the economy and asset prices, there's certain things it's going to set up for. What we're looking for, if you want to generate wealth, this is the time to step up.
Yeah, this is the best time. Macroeconomics is through history. You know, the fall of empires and all this. I think we're falling right now. And, you know, that's a huge problem. All cycles go through. It's approximately the age of a human being. 20 years, 20 years, 20 years. You know, I said that one also. And it matures and the whole thing changes. Fourth turning is always marked by weak leadership. But the people that get hammered are the people operating on yesterday's ideas. We talked about how bull markets make stupid people look smart. You know, so you could be really stupid and you put your money on Apple and you got really rich, or Bitcoin and, oh my God, I'm rich, I'm smart. And then the bear market shows you how stupid you are. And that's why what Ral is saying is going to come quick. All the stupid people who think they're smart are going to find out how stupid they are. And it's going to be a very interesting time. And when the crash comes, it comes so fast on you, you don't know what's going to hit. I think the most important message from today's lesson is the bull has been going up the stairs for a while now. It's about to go out the window. So that's what in Davos, Switzerland, when the IMF says we're going to face the biggest economic headwinds, and voila, I can't believe that. What a gift.
Where do you think I borrow my money from?
From the bank.
Japan.
Okay.
Japan are stupid people. They save money.
Right.
I'm an American. I use debt. I borrow their savings. Japanese believe in saving money. They're good people,
Yeah.
but not very smart financially. So next thing took the dollar off the gold standard. This became fake, but the economy boomed. Real estate boomed.
Yeah.
Because they were printing this as fast as they wanted to. Every time America got into trouble, they printed this.
Can you briefly explain what happens when the government prints a lot of money?
Well, there's inflation. So if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said, I don't work for money, I work for gold and silver. I do not save dollars.
Okay.
I use debt to buy real estate. I pay no taxes legally,
Yeah.
and I save gold and silver.
If I borrow money, guess what? Do I pay taxes on debt?
I guess no.
Why is that? Why is debt tax-free?
I don't know.
Because that's how money is created. And so the banks love it. They love people who borrow lots of money. So how do I get rich? I borrow money and I buy assets with it. The poor person borrows money and buys liabilities like purses, cars, houses, and they get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Remember a couple of years ago how everybody was talking about that a market crash was coming? Everybody's like, oh my God, what if it happens? What if it doesn't? Now everybody's talking about it's going